the Bobcats of Texas State. Well, let's see. It was about 15 years ago that they thought they were going to get the Texas Longhorns. In fact, they had the Longhorns, but they just wouldn't let them have their network. So the Pac-10 at that time missed out on Texas and Oklahoma. And instead, they got Texas State yesterday. I would say a fair trade-off. Ladies and gentlemen, to help us break it all down is John Canzano from johncanzano.com. The Bald-Faced Truth radio show down there in Portland, Oregon, 7:50 The Game, 3 to 6 p.m. daily. And he joins us every single Tuesday to talk all things sports and college athletics and the latest drama with the Pac-12. Huh? Fair trade, Longhorns for the Bobcats?
Yeah,
or the Bobcats
I mean, I think you have to look at perspective, don't you? I mean, but I think you framed it nicely, saying, you could have had Texas. You might have dreamed about Texas A&M. You got Texas State. But hey, look, think about where Oregon State and Washington State were 2 years ago today. 2 years ago today, they were in a panic. Yeah. A year ago today, they were going, hey, it's a table for two. I was looking back at the stuff I wrote just a year ago. Like, they were going to play as a conference of two, and everyone said, oh, they're just going to merge with the Mountain West. It's been, I think a little bit of a rocky takeoff. And then now I think they know that they've got a conference and they've got some viability. Let's see what they can do with it. And they're punching from the outside in, Puck. Everybody knows it. It's not the Pac-12 as we once knew it. But, Bill Walton, what would he have thought of Texas State in the Pac-12?
Well, I did read where someone asked you that in your mailbag this week. I think he'd be rolling over, but, or maybe not. Maybe he'd be celebrating.
Well, he didn't like it. He didn't like it when UCLA and USC left. He particularly was mad at UCLA. And I remember he came, he didn't have to do this, but he wrote that open letter to UCLA and to the world. And he called me and he said, hey, can I publish it on your website? And I was like, he could have called ESPN. He could have called anybody. But he came to me and he said, hey, I want you to publish this thing. He knew what he was doing. He was helping me out. He was speaking directly to Pac-12 fans. And he wasn't happy about it. And I think someday, we're going to see football split away. And I think the conference may realign and come back together in some form or fashion. But look, Washington State and Oregon State have to be thrilled about where they are. I know they're happy. I know they feel like it's been a hell of a journey. But now at least they know they're going to be recognized as a conference by the NCAA.
What is it? The devil's in the details. The details in the devil. What is the phrase?
You want to know the distribution. You want to know half a bowl of soup.
Well, I want to know. I mean, are they coming in full freight here, or what's the deal?
No, they're not coming in full freight. And the Pac-12 presidents were dug in pretty hard in the last 2 weeks, saying that they did not believe that Texas State merited a full share distribution of media rights. And so the models that they were looking at in the days before the deal got done, and we'll eventually know the details of the deals, but the models they were looking at, Puck, were partial share distributions in the early years, escalating towards a full share in year 5. And so I think that you'll see that escalation. And frankly, for Texas State, they were getting a small distribution in the Sun Belt Conference. They're going to be happy with what they're getting in the Pac-12. So, the early years of that Pac-12 deal, I would not expect it to be much more than what Texas State was getting in the Sun Belt. So I think you could see a 25% or a 50% share in year 1. That helps everybody else. It helps, raise the distributions for all the other members. And eventually Texas State becomes in year 5 a full member. So Kelly Damphus, the president at Texas State, I have plans to talk to him later this week. I've texted with him a little bit. He's really excited about it. They believe that they can matter in this conference, and they believe they can use the Pac-12 the same way that Boise State used the Mountain West, and take advantage of the fact that they've got some footing now and some traction in a better conference.
What is the Pac-12? What is Oregon State, Washington State getting with Texas State athletics?
Well, I think they're getting a bigger distribution because they're going to come in at a smaller scale. They're getting a toe into Texas where they can now go in and recruit. And I talked to Greg Biggins, who's a national recruiting analyst for 24/7 Sports, and I said, hey, playing a game in San Marcos, Texas, or is that going to really help you recruit the state of Texas? And he said, look, you're not going to grab recruits that were headed to Texas or Texas A&M, but you can start talking to recruits that, were headed in that second and third tier, some recruits that maybe headed to TCU, Baylor, Houston, places like that. You can now start to say, hey, can we pick off a couple of guys and can we get some players in Texas? Because parents love to hear, hey, every other year, we're going to play a game there. You get a chance to see your kid play. They love to hear that kind of stuff. So I do think it gets a toe into Texas, helps a little bit. I think ideally they would love to have the geography of UNLV, but UNLV just was acting squirrely, acting like it was above the Pac-12, had a chance to come in. I think it caused some bad feelings with some of the departing Mountain West schools that thought like, hey, you think you're above us, but UNLV just didn't have an appetite for any risk right now. And that may change at some point, and UNLV could come in if the Mountain West can't come up with the money that they're supposed to give them. But I think right now the Pac-12 is feeling pretty good. And then the term I keep hearing from Pac-12 ADs is, they're going to look at additive value when it comes to adding football only schools or adding all sports schools. Mm-hmm. So, I think they're first going to focus on, is there a football only edition? Somebody like UTSA that helps a little bit with balancing the schedule. Is there an appetite from Memphis to send football to the Pac-12? I think in the coming days and weeks, we'll find out more about that. And then St. Mary's certainly sitting off to the side going, this is a great development for St. Mary's. Roger Thompson, the president of St. Mary's, I think they were fearful that if the Pac-12 took two schools, there would be no appetite for an additional basketball school. But because they only took one, Puck, St. Mary's is sitting off to the side as the clear best of the rest in the West school in basketball that could come in basketball and potentially come in baseball and help you round out the scheduling. You want to be a 10-team conference in basketball. So I think St. Mary's is feeling a little bit optimistic right now looking over at the Pac-12.
It's a program that has back-to-back 8-5 seasons. What type of a football program is this conference getting? And what is the commitment from this athletic department when it comes to football? We know how crazy the state of Texas is about football. What about this athletic department? What do we know about it? What do we know of their commitment level of making this the best program they can possibly have? And so this conference isn't just taking on, like in college year fraternity, like a body pledge just to get numbers.
Yeah, look, I think there's a couple things. One, Texas State's operating in the shadow of Texas, Texas Tech, Texas A&M, TCU, Baylor, Houston. It's operating in that shadow. It's got that chip on the shoulder that Washington State and Oregon State have for obvious reasons, right? So there's a little bit of that. Like, they really want to matter. There's a little Boise State in them. Like, they really want to matter. There's ambition there. They're not afraid to take risk. It's an interesting thing. There's some math here that I think is interesting for Pac-12 fans. 40,000 students on campus at Texas State. They are big on student fees for athletics. And so they have really tapped into that. So I do think you're going to see spending from Texas State. I think you're going to see their budget increase. I think you're going to see them go for it from a football standpoint. And I think, yesterday they had a big event on campus. They're sort of drafting on the enthusiasm of it. Certainly they're probably reaching out to their donors, but they're a little edgy as a school. And I like that about them, that they're a little edgy and a little ambitious. And so I think they're trying to grow. They're trying to matter. I don't think they're going to be a bottom feeder in this conference. I think people want to look at the last 10 or 15 or 20 years and go, gosh, they haven't really won. And they haven't. They've been terrible if you look at like a 20-year sample size. But if you look at the last 2 years, we know how much has changed in college football. And in the last 2 years, this program is 8-5 and 8-5. And they played Arizona State 31-28 last season. And so I think they really want to matter. I think they're going to attract a higher caliber recruit in the Pac-12 than they did in the Sun Belt. I don't think they're going to be a bottom half of the conference program. I think they'll be top half of the conference. And I think the rest of the conference better pay attention to this because, you've got a school that's anchored in Texas now that's going to have better access to those athletes in Texas. You better come to play if you're Oregon State and Washington State. I think it's a bit of a wake-up call, particularly for Washington State, because I think Oregon State's already proven they're going to spend.
What Oh, I lost my train of thought. I was just going to ask a follow-up with Texas State. Now I just blanked on it. Gosh darn it. St. Mary's, you brought him up.
Yeah.
I'll just pivot to St. Mary's. What's the latest on them, and how quickly do you think? I mean, sounds like if Pac-12 said, yeah, hey, we'd like you to come out as a basketball only, they would jump right away. What's the hesitation?
Well, I think the Pac-12 has told St. Mary's all along, we're focused on football. We're focused on media rights. Then we'll pivot to basketball. And it's just the order of operations because, 80 cents on the dollar of your media rights money is tied to football. But the Pac-12 has got this great basketball conference, and you look at NCAA tournament appearances, you look at the net rankings, it's the fourth or fifth best conference in the country in a given year. It's got two teams in Gonzaga and San Diego State that in the last 5 years that played in the national championship game. And so you have some really good basketball programs. And then St. Mary's, which is, the second rated, program on the western part of the United States, right behind Gonzaga. St. Mary's is the next best program in the West. And so I think you have to look at, St. Mary's is the obvious addition, but Roger Thompson, the president there, he's doing all the right things. They are looking at expanding their home arena, which was a big question. Their arena is subpar compared to the Pac-12 schools. And, he has been told, hang on, we'll get back to you. And I think they've been very patient. They're not pushing the Pac-12 to try to get, an answer now. And I did talk to Stu Jackson, the WCC commissioner, yesterday, and he says, hey, I believe that St. Mary's is better off in the WCC, but that's what he's got to say. But I think the Pac-12, if they don't add a 9th or, a 10th all sports member, I think there's a real chance that St. Mary's or somebody else comes in and plays basketball. Now, if I'm the Pac-12, I would also want St. Mary's in baseball. I would love them in baseball and women's basketball as well. You could really round out your scheduling and your conference. And from a baseball standpoint, Texas State brings something. They beat Texas in baseball earlier this season. I think you add Oregon State, Texas State, St. Mary's, San Diego State. I think you've got Fresno State. You got a decent baseball conference.
UNLV and Memphis. What is? They have to still be out there, right?
Yeah,
that's still an option. How quickly could that still be an option for this?
Well, the mediation for the Pac-12 and the Mountain West, the window for mediation closes July 15th. It's been very quiet, and I've talked to a multitude of litigators who tell me that they believe, a deadline like that, you'd have to go back and ask the judge for another stay. So a deadline like that tends to cause meetings and cause decisions. It could be that a number of complex things have already been decided and they're just trying to hash out one or two things and we get a resolution here. But if the money's not there, if Gloria Nevarez in the Mountain West can't land the plane on the money and the financial promise to UNLV, then UNLV, I think, suddenly becomes a viable option for the Pac-12. And I think the Pac-12 will run out that ground ball just to make sure UNLV is not interested. Because if you can add UNLV, now you're at, 10 members for all sports and 9 in football, you're probably feeling a lot better. The math on the Memphis part is tricky because they're getting a larger than normal distribution in the American. They would have to send all their other sports to the Big East and then, peel off football. But the selling point that you make to Memphis, if you're the Pac-12, is, hey, we're number 5. We are the 5th best conference. Our conference champion is going to get that group of 5 berth in most years. Memphis could go 11-1 in the American and not get to the playoff. And that's the pitch you're making if you're the Pac-12. If you want access to the playoff, this is the better path. This positions you for whatever comes next. The Pac-12 now is this conference, that's got this 5-year runway. And, I keep thinking, George Strait, who's, by the way, a Texas State alum, he had a great line. He said, I'm not here for a long time. I'm just here for a good time. That's the Pac-12 motto, baby. It's 5 years and let's see what happens.
When are you going to Texas State? When are we going to San Marcos?
For people who want to ingratiate themselves to Texas State fans, I pronounced it San Marcos the first time I saw it.
What is
San
it?
Marcos State. San Marcos is how they pronounce it.
San Marcos.
So I reached out to Texas State today. I said, hey, I need to get there. Where am I flying? And they said, fly into Austin, drive. It's like 25, 30 miles outside of Austin.
Okay.
And so not tough to get to. But they're on my list of, I'm going to all the New World Pac-12 schools.
Yeah.
I'm eager to see what they're about and how enthusiastic their students are. They have a reputation of being a party school.
Well, that's
students,
perfect.
when they graduate, Puck, they jump in the river in their cap and gown. The river runs right through campus. And so it's a tradition for them to dive into the river and with their cap and gown on after graduation. So it's my kind of place.
Yeah, you're in. I want you to. So when you go there, I say you go in August, like when it's nice and cool.
Nice and
cool, and then go there.
Tube. I'm going to go tubing down the San Marcos River. Come on.
Can you? Is it okay? Is the river?
Yeah, they tube in that river. Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, 100%.
Right. Just making sure. Yeah. Well, that's right. Can you tube right to the stadium?
I don't know if you can tube to the stadium.
Now
but
that would be epic. Now I'm going to tell you, you can sailgate right to UW. I think Tennessee, there's a river right, takes you right to the game. If you could jump in an inner tube at San Marcos, and tube to the game with like a cooler of beer,
that would be really cool though. But
awesome.
I did have some Texas State fans reach out to me right away, right after it was official yesterday, and they said, and by the way, you were all over this. We've been talking about this, happening and what day it would happen. And, you were all over this. But the fan said, hey, you think Reser Stadium is a tough place to play, or you think that it's tough to go to the blue turf in Boise. Wait till you get to San Marcos. They believe they have the most festive live game, atmosphere in the New World Pac-12. We'll see.
Okay. Well, I'm excited to go.
Yeah. Look, for people who are upset about this, like I'm still hearing from people who are like, well, it's not the Pac-12. It's not the Pac-12. These schools are all gone. But think about where they started, Puck. Washington State and Oregon State were left for dead on the side of the road. Now they have, the best schools, Gonzaga, Boise State, San Diego State. They have the best schools they could possibly get around them in the conference. And they're trying to punch back. There's something inspiring in there.
Yeah. I mean, it's never going to be the same, but we all have to get over it.
Yeah.
We have to get over it, and I'll get over it eventually. But I'll be honest with you, it doesn't matter where this goes and what it turns into. It will never be what I grew up with. That's out. And so it's there's just part of me. It's going to take it's another. Think about this. I've built up 50. Once I start watching 40 years of watching one particular conference.
Yeah.
Rooting against people, rooting for them, and all that. I'm not going to be, if I'm around another 40 years, that's going to be a remarkable.
And I think it's going to change again in 5 years. And maybe it helps a little bit. I think in the next 5 years, starting in 2026, I believe the Pac-12 champion's going to get into the playoff.
Okay.
And so maybe the calculus changes, or the attitude or the framing of this changes when you see Washington State or Oregon State win the Pac-12 in one of these 5 years, and they're in the playoff. And granted, when they get there, they're operating with a budget that is fractional compared to the Big Ten and the SEC schools. They may get their teeth kicked in, but let's see how that feels for those fan bases when they get there.
I was looking at their stadium. It's a cool looking stadium. It basically looks just like Martin Stadium.
Yeah.
It's pretty much like a carbon copy of Martin Stadium. Same size, almost same size, everything.
Yeah. And the university president there, I love that president. He is he's not a normal president. He paints outside the boxes. He's not the traditional academic. He's not stuffy. He's pushing the envelope a little bit. And I think the balance that he's trying to strike is he's pushing for R1 research status. The PhD programs at Texas State have been boosted in his time. And then he's pushing growth in athletics. And so if you want to matter in athletics, you got to matter in football. So I think Texas State is hoping that the Pac-12 can be that springboard for them to matter and register nationally. And that would be great for the Pac-12 if they're trying to punch above their weight.
Okay. What do you got cooking? What's the latest at johncanzano.com? What do we got coming down the pipeline?
Well, look, I've got all what happens next in the Pac-12, including with mediation, my thoughts on mediation, where they're going to go in expansion, the basketball piece, the branding that they're trying to quietly push, which is they're trying to push that, hey, we're the 5th best conference. That I think the Pac-12 is going to make a push to try to say, hey, it's Power 5. It's still got to be Power 5. How can you hold us accountable and have us paying damages on the House settlement and then not give us a seat at the table? I think there's an argument to be made there, but all of the what comes next is up there right now if people want to check it out. And then, Puck, I got a chance to talk to a 97-year-old Pac-12 fan Oregon State fan. Yesterday, 2 days ago, on the phone. She lives in Corvallis. She died last night. She knew she was dying. She wanted to talk to me about what it was like to be a season ticket holder for 70 years at Oregon State. She was a ticket holder all the way to the end. And she knew she was dying and said, hey, can I tell you a few things? I'm going to write that column later this week. It's one of those human interest stories that you love so much.
Yeah, I love all of that stuff. Yeah, I mean, I eat it all up.
I mean, somebody think about it. You're on your deathbed. You're 97, and you just have such perspective. Her perspective was, amazing, remarkable to me. And she was like, I don't really know why you'd want to talk to me, she says, but I said, yeah, you're 97. You have some things to teach.
How were you alerted to that?
Her son reached out to me and said, hey, my mom is in her final days. Nobody's ever written anything about her, said anything about her. She has been there in the front row at Oregon State football and baseball and basketball for 70 years. Nobody knows who she is. She's just been there. And he's like, if you want to talk to her, I think she's got 2 or 3 days to live. He reached out to me over the weekend. And so I got on the phone with her, and man, she brain sharp, had a great conversation with her, and then called her back the next day. And then I got word last night that she passed away yesterday at 4:30.
And we look forward to that. That's coming out later this week?
Yeah, later this week. Yep.
Today, one thing I wanted to bring up, today is the first day of the college sports revenue sharing. What do you think this is going to look like? How big of a blank show is this going to be?
It's going to be bad, and there's going to be lawsuits, and then it's being celebrated by like the mid-major schools, the smaller schools, the group of 5 schools. They're celebrating it because they're saying, look, before there was no ceiling, there was no cap. We didn't know. We're trying to reach, and we don't know how far we have to reach. Now, at least we know how far we need to reach. But I also think it's going to settle down some of the NIL deals and settle down some of the spending. And we've seen it get off the rails. And I kind of think that, the players like John Mateer, who jumped and took all that money, and other players who have jumped around, are going to look back and go, hey, we got out right at the right time, because the revenue sharing really is capping what the schools can give, and the NIL deals are supposed to be real deals here moving forward. They can't, be these phantom deals. And then, I had a tax guy who's a sports tax guy who's really tuned into this too. There's a tax element to this. They're not going to get W-2s. They're going to get 1099s. And so, this is taxable income. How will that impact, will the IRS adjust and say, no, these need to be employees. They need to pay, when a high profile player plays a game in Pullman, are they going to be paying a jock tax locally and to the state? Are they paying that in Oregon? Are they going to be paying that, as they go around the country? Or is it only going to be that their income is taxable in their home state, like endorsement income is? So there's a lot of tentacles to this that people haven't thought about. And I think it's going to be messy.
Yeah. How are schools preparing for it? I mean, I know they have been preparing for it. I'm sure you've talked to Oregon State. What's the number one thing that they've had to, that has been, I guess, difficult to deal with
I think, they had 44 scholarship baseball players, and they had to go, okay, we're only going to have 34 scholarships. So there were 10 players at Oregon State, and everybody's like, why are so many Oregon State players getting in the portal? Well, it's because these are backup guys that were told, we don't have a scholarship for you next year. And so you're seeing that in non-revenue generating sports across the spectrum. And you're seeing small moves, like the volleyball coaches at the University of Oregon left Oregon for Kansas. All the players left for Kansas, right? Why? Well, because Oregon is informing their women's volleyball program. They're going, hey, we're not going to tier you as a top sport like football or basketball. Here's where you are in our tiering. So this has all been going on over the last 6 months. I think these schools nationally have said, track and field doesn't matter as much to us at Washington State. We're getting rid of all the throwing events, and we're going to keep the program. We don't want to drop the program, but this is how we avoid dropping the program. So you're having a lot of those decisions being made. Rowing at Washington, we talked about this. If you want to fund those scholarships, not going to come from the school. You're going to have to get donors who come out and basically say, hey, I want to create a scholarship for a rower. And so you're going to have that happen, I think, a lot more than before. And I think you're going to see some national champions in some non-revenue generating sports that are not traditional, because some of the big schools are going to go, hey, 80% of our revenue sharing is going to football. I'm hearing 75 to 80% at most schools going to football.
How can somewhere like Kansas be more committed than Oregon?
Because they're just saying we've got a little bit more money. We've got more money. We're going to share a little more, and volleyball matters more to us. And Oregon's going, football matters, men's basketball matters, everything else down here.
Okay.
And I think you're going to see some weird things like Oregon track and field. You know, I need a bigger sample size, but they did not have a good outdoor track and field season. They did not fare well at the NCAA championships hosted at their own track. And I'm wondering if Oregon is going to be able to be a track and field power because so much of their resources now are allocated to football.
Yes or no to this question. And I'm going to answer yes before I ask you the question.
Okay.
Every time I walk around and I see some little kid out there with a lemonade stand in the summer, I always stop, even if I don't want lemonade. I do it every time because I love the lemonade stand. John, you?
Yes, I'm a yes. My only no would be like, if they don't have, I don't want to stop if I don't have cash on me or they don't have Venmo. I mean, it's going to be just an awkward, I'll be back some other time, you know?
Sure.
But I love that. I love an young entrepreneur out there, mom probably sitting in her car down the street or whatever, you know.
I did encounter one the other day that had a QR code, and that was the first time.
That works.
I was like, oh, okay. Yeah. Well, I'll do it. Here's the phone. Boom. There you go.
What are you paying for a glass of lemonade though? Let's just,
I'll
you a
pay
tipper?
$5.
You're a tipper?
$5. Yeah.
Do they yell tipper when you walk away?
No, but I'll just give whatever you want. Even if it's a small little Dixie cup, I'll just give it whatever you want. I love the lemonade.
You're out there you're just giving them, you're trying to encourage kids. That's not a bad thing.
And when I retire from this, I am going to buy one of those ice cream trucks.
Ooh.
You know, with the song.
You're going to be that guy.
Yeah. Is that Creeper? Is that kind of like van without a window guy?
No, but I've never aspired to be that guy.
Hey, I'm just saying when there's nothing to do, you got to do something fun. That's kind of fun driving around.
It is kind of fun. And you can park anywhere you want. You can double park. Nobody's going to care. You put the music on.
It's
Who
like
cares?
Pavlov. It's like a dog. When you hear that, you're like, you immediately stop. You're like, oh, man.
I always thought that would be great. Like you could park anywhere you want. It's almost like having a police vehicle, you know?
Yeah. You can do whatever you want.
The rules don't apply. You got ice cream sandwiches.
I asked the guy, I saw a guy one time a few weeks ago. I said, how much would it be for, how many people would you need if I just like rented you to come out I want him to come out to baseball practice. He was like, I need at least 700 people. I'm like, excuse me? Like, there's 12. Is that going to work?
12 is not going to get it done.
No, not going to be done. All right. I've taken up too much of your time. Thank you. Enjoy the 4th, and we'll talk to you next week. Thanks, John.
All right, buddy. Thank you.